This video I want to talk about using the Bevel tool to insert new edge loops or use it to define a crisper or sharper edge whenever we turn on smooth preview on our model. Okay, so I'm going to take this mesh, which is made up of all quads, and if I wanted to make it smooth, right, I press 3 on my keyboard and it looks like this gooey mess, right? Maybe that's what you want. It's not what I want for this model. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try a few things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just try the crease tool, right? Let's just try it on this top edge for now. So I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, Crease Tool, right? And I'll look at that, and it's looking okay. You can see, well, first I'd probably also want to get these guys, and then I'd have to go across and pretty much have to crease all these edges that are along the boundary. I'll put mine right there. But you'll notice if your faces are fairly large and spaced out, like if you have a lower poly mesh, the normals look kind of weird, right? That looks, shading on that looks just kind of a little bizarre, right? It doesn't really know what to do at these corners right here. And as it travels along a larger face, especially if it's like a pretty significant curvature that I would normally get under smoothing, like you can see like back here, if I smooth that out, it's a pretty large curvature or silhouette form change right there. And so if I added a crease there, you know, it's doing some weird stuff to the normals. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all my edges and I'm going to uncrease them. Mesh tools, crease tool, middle mouse click and drag to uncrease. Okay. Other thing I could do, obviously, is I can insert an edge loop, right? And as we looked at with our smoothing examples before in class, oops, let me go ahead and reset my settings for my tool settings. So reset tool, all right? Go in here, and if the closer I make a edge loop to my one of my edges, it will hold better or make it sharper, right? So if I add an edge loop right here, it's going to pull right there. I can do the same thing on the other side. All right, so I'm just adding, and these are called holding edges. These are just adding edge loops to make an edge crisper, right, and have a sharper crease to it when you smooth it out, right? And it's not perfectly crisp, right, but it has a nice sharpness to it, but it still catches the light in a nice way, compared to if it's just flat shaded, right? It's not really catching the light along that edge. It's just either lighting this side or lighting this side, right? But with this right here, you can see there's like this in-between face as it smooths out just in this really small area, which is nice. Okay, so that's one method of doing that. So I could go across and I could just make sure, essentially, wherever I want a sharp edge, I'm just inserting an edge loop on either side of all of these edge areas, right? And I didn't mention this, but I'm using the Insert Edge Loop tool, right? So this is under Mesh Tool, Insert Edge Loop tool. And it lets you just click and drag to add a new edge loop, which is nice. Another way I could insert edge loop is to use the multi-cut tool. So I could switch over to the multi-cut tool. I could do the same thing, and I'm just going to use the multi-cut tool and hold down Control, and I can just drop it in. And if I hold down Control, it's going to cut. Make multiple cuts across these edges, but for an entire poly loop. Okay. All right, I can do the same thing. It's pretty much the same method. Okay. A lot of times, what I like to do is use the Bevel tool, especially if I'm going to be splitting a very large or long connected boundary, right? So the Bevel tool, what it does is it takes an edge you select, or multiple edges, and when you click on it, you'll see it splits that edge into two, right? And so it creates a new face between them. And then you can increase the segments, right? You add a new edge loop, or an edge inside there, and the more you add, the more it's going to approximate this curved shape when you have chamfer on, right? Well, let's just say, for now, we'll just keep it simple and say the segment just adds new subdivision levels to it. There's a couple other settings. One is this depth setting, right? And so if you turn that depth setting on, if you have more segments, what it does is it's going to, or go negative, what it's going to do, if you go 0, it's just going to flatten it out between those objects. It's just going to treat this whole face like right here flat. And if I come down here, it's going to invert it and push it inwards. I'm just going to keep that at 1. And this is going to come on, or this is going to be affected when I do chamfering. So what chamfering is it's essentially this effect of pushing in and rounding out that edge that you just beveled. Right? So if I turn it on, you can see it start to chamfer, cut in and round out that shape. Let's turn on a bunch of edges. Right? So you see chamfer off, it's going to cut them, but it's not actually going to move or change the shape of the boundary. And with chamfer on, you can see it's starting to round that out. And let's see what happens when I type in 0. So you can see if I wanted a flat one, but I still wanted all those edge loops, but I wanted like a 45-degree angle here, I could just set that depth to 0. Fraction is going to be how wide this bevel is. So I'm going to hold Control or Control Shift and left click on drag on this so I can get like finer controls. Right? And if I hold Control, it's going to be a little bit faster. It's doing it by the hundredths decimal place. And if I don't hold on to, or if I don't hold Shift or Control as a modifier and just click and drag, it's going to do by the tenths. Okay. So let me undo this, get back out of this. All right. So the problem that you might notice with this is that when I bevel an edge, it doesn't necessarily always make good topology, right? So what it did here is, in order to split this into 2 polygons, it had to create a new triangle or new polygon right here, which is a problem because now this is an n-gon. This is a 5-sided polygon, right? And it's going to mess up my subdivisions when I want to start subdividing. You'll see these are both n-gons, and I can't use a lot of my tools on those n-gons, right? When I smooth out my mesh, it's going to look a little funny too. It's not going to behave properly. You see I'm getting these little artifacts right there. So we generally want to avoid those n-gons. So the safest way to fix this is to either fix the topology afterwards and just realize that you're making an n-gon, right? So maybe I'm creating, I want to create like a multi-cut this way, or insert an edge loop this way, right? And I'm just cutting that n-gon up so there's 2 quads now. So there's a quad here, and then I have this triangle. It's not going to look good, most likely, but at least it's topology I can predict and I can handle, right? And I'd have to do some more if more playing around if I wanted to make that a really sharp crease. What I tend to do is I tend to try to use beveling on an entirely connected edge loop, so an edge loop that connects back on itself. So you'll see this edge loop goes all the way around and then comes back to the beginning, right? So the nice thing is it's never going to have a spot where it stops and it splits, it goes from splitting 2 edges like we have here and combining into 1. So I'm not going to run into that issue of, you know, splitting, creating this little triangle here and then creating these n-gons. So what I do is I'm going to select a continuous edge loop that goes all the way around. And then now if I click bevel, you can see I did not create, because it connected back on itself, it just easily split this edge loop that went all the way around into 2 edges, right? And then what I could do is I could go ahead and add another segment, right? Maybe if I wanted to make this a flat or a sharp bevel, or like a flat 45-degree, like kind of beveled edge. It's hard to say with bevel, but it's like cut and just very planar. Maybe I would just set this depth to 0, right? Maybe add another segment there. And then I should have more of a prominent edge there. And I might need to add some more edge loops just to kind of reinforce the other side of these edges, right? And you'll start to see I have something of a 45-degree angle there, right? Probably a little bit too much of a indentation in there. I'm getting kind of a bend inside of it, or this kind of strange belting right there. And that's probably just because of the difference in the weights of these edges on either side. So let's go ahead and undo that. Okay. So if I was to, if I wanted to go ahead and add beveling to the whole object, I could go ahead and bevel that side. Let's go ahead and start with this one, bevel, right? And then I could maybe do this one as well. So we'll just go through there, bevel, right? And that's actually doing a pretty good job. I'm not getting any n-gons. These are all quads. The corners are going to be a little confusing, right, for Maya, right? And obviously the bevel is very different in these different areas because I'm getting a bevel right here and then it's pretty wide, and then I'm going across and then beveling the top of that bevel. So you can see this is the bottom of this first bevel, and this is the top of that other bevel. So if you're trying to get these bevels to feel like they're kind of like on the same plane, or they're kind of like part of the same beveling action across the whole object, what you'll probably want to do is you'll probably want to bevel all these sharp edges at the same time and keep them connected. Okay, so I'm just going to go around, select all these edges I want to bevel, and then I'll just go ahead and click bevel, and let's go ahead and bring the fraction down, and you'll see I have something like this. And with the segments at 1, which means that it just splits into a quad or into a polygon and it doesn't add any new edge loops, I have these triangles here. If I increase my segment to 2, see now I have these little quads right here on these corners. And it's not necessary you do that, but I just like to do that sometimes. You see now I'm getting some pretty sharp results along those edges, right? So that's a lot simpler than having to go in and what's it called? Adding an edge loop, adding an edge loop, adding an edge loop, and making. And the nice thing about this is all those the bevel across the entire object, that's going to be evenly spaced, right? It's going to be the same thickness. So I'm not going to, if I'm manually adding holding edges with the insert edge loop tool or the multi-cut tool, I'm starting to get into issues where these edges will be like differently spaced across the object, which might look kind of bad depending on what you're trying to do. Another thing I like to use bevels for is it's really easy just to split two edges, right? I could use the insert edge loop tool, but I could also just split these two edges on a flat surface, right? And so I can just grab this and click bevel. If I'm not on a bound, like an edge or a corner, like an edge like this or a corner like this, if I just bevel an edge loop like this, all it's really going to do is just going to split that into two evenly spaced edges. And I can use the fraction to kind of space them out, and then I can add more edge loops by changing those segments. So you can use it to insert new edge loops if you want to, by essentially adding new edge loops by splitting a previous edge loop. Another thing I like to do is I might have something like, let's go ahead and I'm going to scale this. Oop, I grabbed the wrong stuff. Okay, I'm going to scale this in, and let's say I'm going to be making a hole, right? Circularize. All right, so let's say I have this hole, I've been working on this, I got this to the degree I want, and I'm going to start modifying this. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to just grab these 4 faces, and then I'm going to click circularize, right? So I wouldn't do it like this, but let's say I was doing something like this, and I have this hole, and I'm getting ready, and I need let's not worry about this face right here. I accidentally selected this side. Get rid of that. Okay. So let's say I created this hole like this, and I needed to get a sharper, or I needed to somehow get a sharper boundary around this curve right here, right? Maybe I need to, I'm doing something in here, and I just need this to be tighter, right? Right now it's actually just fine, right? But the issue I'm going to run into is if I try to insert new edge loops, because of my edge flow, right, I don't have circular radial topology going around this. I have grid topology, right? So when I try to insert an edge loop, you'll see I have to add an edge loop here, I have to add an edge loop here, I have to add an edge loop here, edge loop here to get all the way around that object, and that's not pretty, right? I'm adding a lot of extra topology that I don't need, and it's starting to run creases and bad edges across my whole object, right? So it's a little bit out of control. So, getting that radial topology is really nice. But I already created this hole. It's kind of a problem. What I could do is, well, there's a couple things. One of the easiest things I could do is just extrude, scale it in a little bit, right? And then now I have radial topology, right? But another cool thing you could do is you can just grab this and you can click on, actually, you know what? It might not even let me bevel it. I could go ahead and close this hole. So I'm just going to fill it. Then I can go ahead and click bevel, right, and bring it down a little bit, and then I can delete that hole, right. And so I've used bevel in the past. This might not be exactly the best example, but I've used bevel in the past where I've needed to create, like, around a selection I have, radial topology, but I was at a state where I couldn't do the extrusion method where I just extruded and scaled down, or something like that. So if it wasn't like let's say it's going to be something like this. What I might do is I'll delete these for now. Let's grab this, and I'm just going to pull these in, pull this down, right? And so let's say for some reason this is the shape I wanted, and I need to put a sharp, or I wanted to get like a crease around here so I can start working with this. So what I might do is I could, and let's get rid of this edge loop down here because I'm going to need a little space. I didn't prepare this very well. But what I can do is, if I wanted to do the extrusion method, again, it's probably just as easy to do the extrusion with like an offset on it. See, I'm getting something kind of a little weird right there. But what I could do also is I can fill this in, and I could do the same method where I just bevel that and just give it a small fraction. And in this case, that's actually not perfect or not exactly what I want, because what it's going to do is it's going to move that original boundary, which isn't that big a deal up here, but down here it's going to be annoying, right? Because you'll see when I do that, it's going to move this down, right? So I might straighten it. So again, this might not be necessarily the time that I needed to do this. I was just trying to find another instance that might work with this. So I've definitely used it to kind of reinforce edges and holes and new extrusions that I need to make, but did not have the radial topology to add new edge loops without going through my entire mesh. Okay, so this is pretty much the basics of the bevel tool. The bevel tool you really need to be careful of what you're beveling, right? If you're beveling a disconnected edge loop, right? So you're not doing a full edge loop all the way, only doing a partial one like this one, right? You need to keep in mind the fact that you are creating bad topology, right? So I'm creating in-gon here, in-gon here, in-gon here, in-gon here, right? To create this in that little triangle, right? So you can use the bevel to split partial edge loops, but just be aware of how you need to clean it up, okay? So that's pretty much it. And I've used it on all of these objects to kind of get these like nicer kind of edges on them, right? Actually on this one, I think I used a crease tool on this one, right? So I just pull this one back. But you can see I did it on this edge right here. I think I did it on this edge, this interior edge right here, and this one right here, just to kind of help it crease the edge and also still catch the light like that.